Pucón, a tourist city located in Chile, South America, is considered one of the most beautiful in the country and attracts thousands of tourists every year. But amidst all its beauty, the city was the scene of a terrible event, an event that led Antonia Barra, just 20 years old, to give up her own life. This is one of the cases that had the most impact throughout Chile, sparking a wave of protests across the country and resulting in the creation of a new law. Antonia Barra was born in a city in Chile, South America. She was the daughter of Alejandro and Marcela Barra, who in addition to her had 4 other children. The family lived in Temuco, a Chilean city with a population of over 220,000 residents. It is said that Alejandro and Marcela worked hard to ensure their children had a good quality of life. Antonia was described by her family and friends as a cheerful, hard-working, and very intelligent young woman. She was also very close to her family. Since her teenage years, Antonia had been a source of pride for her parents. At the time of the events in 2019, Antonia was 20 years old and had been studying engineering for 2 years. Her peers and professors described her as a smiling and very dedicated young woman. Antonia had a great ability to make friends and in a way was quite popular. In addition, her name was listed on the college honor roll, reserved only for the most diligent students. Antonia had many dreams, one of which was to study in the United States to become fluent in English. In September 2019, Antonia received an invitation from friends to spend a holiday with them in Pucón. Pucón is a tourist city, considered one of the most beautiful in Chile. It is the perfect destination for those seeking nature-related sports, such as hiking and kayaking. The city also has several natural hot springs and a wonderful view of the Great Villarrica volcano. Antonia's friends told her they had planned to spend September 18th and 19th in Pucón. These dates fell on a significant historical holiday in Chile, celebrating the formation of the country as a nation-state. Many people take this holiday to travel, and Antonia's friends were no exception. After receiving the invitation, Antonia called her parents and asked what they thought about her going to Pucón with her friends. As Antonia was very close to her family, she always kept in touch with them and kept them informed about everything. Upon learning of the trip, Antonia's parents saw no problem and said it would be good for her to have fun with her friends. At the same time, Antonia had just ended a relationship with a guy named Rodrigo. Her relationship with Rodrigo had lasted about 2 years, and she was a bit upset about the breakup. Those closest to Antonia, especially her parents, were aware of the situation, and as they wanted to see her happy, they thought this trip would be a great idea. Thus, Antonia traveled with her friends to Pucón, where she spent 2 days. When she returned home, her parents thought everything had gone well, but they were very mistaken. Do you remember Antonia's ex-boyfriend? Well, his name is Rodrigo Canario, and before we continue with the story, we need to understand a bit about the relationship between the two. Antonia and Rodrigo met in college and were together for about 2 years. According to people close to them, Antonia was very fond of Rodrigo and at times a bit jealous, not liking Rodrigo to talk to other women. However, Rodrigo had several female friends at college, and one of them was Carla Pinedo, who Antonia was particularly jealous of because Carla and Rodrigo were very close. Carla stated that her relationship with Rodrigo was always purely platonic, as Carla also had a boyfriend, but despite this, Antonia was very jealous of their friendship. At some point in 2019, Antonia sent a direct message to Carla on Instagram saying she would no longer interfere with their friendship because she and Rodrigo were breaking up. In the same message, Antonia admitted she was jealous of their friendship because things were not going well between her and Rodrigo. The exact reasons for Antonia and Rodrigo's breakup are not known, but it is clear that even after the split, they continued to keep in touch as friends. Some close acquaintances even suggested there was a strong possibility of them getting back together, but this never happened. Regardless, Antonia and Rodrigo still maintained contact, and this is an important point in the story we will address later. Returning to Antonia's trip, when she got home after the holiday, it seemed like everything was fine, but at college, some people started noticing something unusual about her. Antonia appeared to be a bit depressed and was avoiding contact with people. She missed some exams and also submitted blank assignments. She was no longer the exemplary student she once was. Naturally, Antonia's friends noticed this drastic change in her personality, but whenever they asked if everything was okay, she said yes and avoided any further questions. This behavior continued for weeks, and whenever she interacted with her family, she was able to mask her true feelings well, as no one noticed anything different about her. Almost a month later, on October 12th, Antonia's parents had a planned trip, during which they would be away from the city for a few days. Antonia chose to stay home, so her mother suggested she invite a friend to keep her company. Antonia called a friend named Francesca Duran, whom she affectionately referred to as Fran. They had been friends for a long time, and Francesca mentioned that on the day they were together, she also noticed that Antonia seemed depressed. When Francesca asked why, Antonia said she had received some harsh messages from her ex-boyfriend, who had even cursed her out. Francesca asked why he seemed so angry, and Antonia explained that Rodrigo, her ex-boyfriend, had gotten jealous because of a photo she posted on social media, which showed her with another guy. Francesca advised her friend to ignore it, as they had already ended their relationship, and it made no sense for Rodrigo to be jealous. After spending 2 days at Antonia's house, Francesca had to return home at her mother's request. Antonia asked her friend to stay one more day because she still felt very depressed. Francesca asked her mother if she could stay another day at Antonia's house, but her mother said no. However, she suggested that Antonia could stay at Francesca's house. Despite the invitation, Antonia preferred to remain in her own home. The next day, Antonia's maternal grandmother and her younger sister found her lifeless in her bedroom on the second floor of the house. Antonia had taken her own life. In despair, her grandmother and sister called Alejandro and Marcela to inform them of what had happened. On that date, Antonia's parents were already on their way home, but they were still on the road. In fact, her father was driving when he received the call and learned of the tragedy. He said he had to slow down the car to avoid an accident, as he was overwhelmed by the news. For the whole family, it was an extreme shock, as no one had noticed that Antonia was so distressed that she would do something like this. Trying to understand what had happened, her parents began to check if she had left any explanation, and that's when they found audio messages on her phone in which she had said goodbye to friends and her ex-boyfriend. They also discovered something terrible. Antonia had been the victim of forced intercourse during the trip she took with her friends about a month earlier to the city of Pucón. There was an audio message sent on the days she was in Pucón, in which Antonia asked a friend who had traveled with her for help. In the audio, Antonia tells her friend that she was a victim of forced intercourse and that she was desperate. Knowing this, Antonia's parents contacted this friend who had traveled with their daughter to find out exactly what had happened. It was then that they learned more details about the story. This friend, named Consuelo, said that on the first night of the trip, she, her boyfriend, and Antonia decided to go out and went to a nightclub where they ran into some acquaintances. Some of these friends were classmates from college, while others were mutual friends of Antonia and Consuelo. They danced and drank for a while until Consuelo decided to leave with her boyfriend. They even invited Antonia to leave with them, but she was having a great time and didn't want to go at that moment, saying she would leave later. The last person Consuelo saw Antonia talking to was a man named Martin Pradenas, who was 28 years old. After that, Consuelo and her boyfriend went home. Antonia had known Martin for some time. It is not entirely clear how they met. Some sources say they attended the same school, while others claim they lived in the same city and had mutual friends. In any case, there were comments from Antonia on Martin's social media photos dating back to 2015. After spending a few more hours at the nightclub, Antonia left the venue accompanied by Martin. A mutual friend of Antonia and Consuelo called Consuelo to inform her that Antonia seemed a bit unwell when she left with Martin, as if she were very drunk. This happened around 7 a.m. the morning after the party. Consuelo sent messages and tried to call Antonia, but she did not respond or answer the calls. Only after a few hours did Consuelo finally receive a response from her friend. Antonia sent several messages to Consuelo, but these messages were completely confusing, with incorrect or incomplete words, as if Antonia were out of touch with reality. After several confusing messages, Antonia managed to write a phrase that Consuelo could understand. Antonia wrote that she was in some sort of cabin, a chalet that many tourists rent when they go on vacation in Pucón. After this message, Antonia sent an audio recording to her friend in which she desperately reported that she had been the victim of forced intercourse and pleaded with Consuelo to come and get her.
Lo único que me acuerdo fue me despertado, estar como más consciente, y el güey estaba arriba mío, y le dije, sale, me metí.
Immediately, Consuelo and her boyfriend went to the chalet where Antonia was staying. This chalet had been rented by Martin and his friends. It was a large chalet with capacity for 10 people. Upon arriving at the location, Consuelo, very angry, started an argument with Martin, questioning what he had done to her friend. Martin denied everything that Antonia had said in the audio, and the other people in the chalet were confused, as they had no idea what had happened inside Martin's room. Consuelo took Antonia back to the house where they were staying and told her friend that they should go to the police to report the incident. However, Antonia, very shaken, only cried and said that she felt dirty, that she just wanted to take a shower, that she was ashamed, and didn't want anyone to know what had happened. In Antonia's mind, she felt partially responsible for what had occurred, and she feared her parents would be very disappointed in her. She was mentally devastated, so she begged Consuelo not to tell anyone. Antonia also told her friend that after leaving the nightclub with Martin, she lost consciousness, and when she woke up, Martin was on top of her, committing the act. This explained why Antonia had changed her behavior since returning from Pucón. She was feeling destroyed inside. One of Martin's friends, who was at the same chalet in Pucón, ended up spreading to other friends that Antonia and Martin had slept together. This friend did not know that Martin had actually taken advantage of Antonia, as he did not see when they arrived at the chalet. In his mind, everything had been consensual. Since almost everyone there was a mutual friend, the story that Antonia and Martin had slept together spread and eventually reached Carla Pinedo's boyfriend. In case you don't remember, Carla Pinedo is a very close friend of Rodrigo, Antonia's ex-boyfriend. Carla's boyfriend told her that it seemed Antonia no longer liked Rodrigo, as she had slept with another man. Upon hearing this story, Carla mentioned to Rodrigo that Antonia had slept with someone else, but she did not reveal who that person was. Rodrigo was very upset and angry because, as previously mentioned, he was still in contact with Antonia, and they had discussed possibly getting back together. Rodrigo felt betrayed upon learning this, and was even more furious when he found out that it all happened on his birthday. It was after this that Antonia received numerous messages from Rodrigo where he cursed her. These were the same messages that Antonia had mentioned to her friend Francesca, which she had received from her ex-boyfriend. Antonia was already deeply depressed from everything that had happened, and receiving these messages only made things worse. On that same date, October 12th, after Francesca left, the conversation between Antonia and Rodrigo continued. Tired of being insulted as if she had cheated on Rodrigo, even though they were not together, she eventually explained to him that she had been a victim of Martin. What Antonia did not know was that Rodrigo was recording the call because he wanted to show Carla what Antonia had said. Rodrigo then sent this audio to his friend Carla, who listened to it on her phone at a loud volume, and her boyfriend ended up hearing it. Carla's boyfriend knew Martin and went to inform him that Antonia was accusing him of a crime. Meanwhile, according to Carla, Rodrigo even mentioned wanting to tell Antonia's parents about the whole story, but Antonia asked him not to tell anyone, as she was feeling very ashamed and dirty. When Martin learned that the story between him and Antonia was spreading, he called Antonia and started threatening her. After the threats, Antonia called Rodrigo again, disappointed that he had disclosed something she had asked to keep secret. She believed Rodrigo had spoken directly to Martin, which was not the case. Antonia and Rodrigo even discussed this issue in person. On the same night Francesca left, Rodrigo went to Antonia's house. They talked for a while and then Rodrigo went home. After going through everything, from being the victim of a terrible crime, dealing with rumors, psychological damage, and fighting with Rodrigo, Antonia felt like trash. Although Antonia was a victim, she also felt partly responsible for what happened, and this was destroying her mind. The next day around 2 p.m., Antonia sent a voice message to Rodrigo again, in which she said goodbye. Later that same day, she was found dead in her room by her grandmother and sister. After learning about the entire situation, Antonia's parents decided to go to the authorities and report what had happened. Soon after, the media was informed, and the story became public knowledge. This caused a huge outcry across Chile, leading to numerous protests demanding justice both in the streets and on social media. While the authorities did their part, Antonia's family began preparing her funeral. Antonia was buried in a cemetery in the city of Temuco. The farewell ceremony was attended by dozens of people, including family, friends, and university colleagues. Amid all this, other women came forward claiming they had also been victims of Martin. Many said they had not reported Martin earlier due to shame, but after learning about Antonia's case, they gathered the courage to come forward. This story revealed that Martin had acted as a true predator throughout his life, having preyed on several victims. Accusations surfaced against him for crimes committed in 2010, 2012, 2013, 2014, and 2018. There were even accounts from his childhood. A woman who cared for him in kindergarten stated during an interview that some girls complained that Martin would touch them inappropriately. At the time, since Martin was very young, this was not taken seriously, and the kindergarten staff only informed his mother about these behaviors. In a public statement, Chilean authorities expressed their belief that Martin had more victims beyond those who had come forward. They urged women not to feel ashamed as they were the victims, and emphasized that their testimonies and accusations were crucial in keeping a criminal like Martin behind bars. Initially, Martin denied all accusations. He claimed that he and Antonia were very drunk, and therefore he remembered nothing. Regarding the other women who accused him, he maintained that in all cases, everything was consensual. Soon after, while the case against Martin was ongoing, his own defense attorney came across a video showing Antonia and Martin walking together on the day of the incident. The attorney argued that the video proved Antonia was with Martin voluntarily and not because she was forced. However, in the video, which was recorded by a local security guard, Antonia appeared visibly disoriented and had difficulty walking, as if she were extremely drunk or drugged. It was clear that Antonia was not well, and even if she had tried to escape Martin, she would not have succeeded. Moreover, Antonia had told Consuelo that shortly after leaving the nightclub with Martin, she lost consciousness, and when she woke up, Martin was already on top of her, committing the assault. It was evident that following the release of this video, many people realized that Antonia was in a poor state. The evidence intended to aid Martin's defense ended up becoming evidence against him. In the following days, the court prohibited Antonia's family from posting on any social media or discussing the crime Martin had committed. They were also required to delete all posts they had made about the case. Meanwhile, Martin recorded a video presenting his version of the story. In the video, which was posted on YouTube, Martin claimed his innocence but lamented that no one believed him.
Bueno, hago esta entrevista porque se han cumplido los plazos. Yo y mi familia hemos guardado silencio por lo delicada de la situación, pero ya acercándose la formalización, se cumplen los plazos legales donde nosotros podemos salir y desmentir algunas cosas que se han dicho con respecto a este caso.
Usted, ¿por qué la gente que vea esta entrevista puede pensar que Martín Pradenas es inocente de los hechos que le imputa hoy día el Ministerio Público?
Porque nosotros claramente estamos demostrando con pruebas, con hechos fehacientes, de que las cosas no son como se están diciendo. Aquí se ha manipulado información, se ha mentido deliberadamente, y eso es lo que venimos a aclarar hoy día, que esto no es como se ha dicho ni es como se ha mostrado.
¿Usted sigue manteniendo su inocencia, Martín?
Completamente. Yo sigo manteniendo que soy inocente, y no porque se me haya hecho un juicio público o porque se haya manejado la información para hacerme ver culpable significa que lo soy.
During the investigation, the police discovered that Martin had deleted over 14,000 photos from his computer. Additionally, when the police requested his cell phone for examination, he claimed that the device had broken and that he had thrown it away. The first trial of Martin Pradenas took place in 2020. During this trial, all previous allegations against the defendant were dismissed as evidence. The argument for this was the lack of concrete proof that Martin had indeed committed these crimes, apart from the testimonies of the women who accused him. Therefore, only Antonia's accusation was considered. At the end of the trial, it was decided that Martin would remain under house arrest until further investigations were conducted. He was prohibited from leaving the country or approaching any family members of the victim. This decision was not well received by the public and even by other lawyers and judges, leading to a new wave of protests across the country, even during the quarantine. After significant public pressure, the appellate court, responding to a request from the prosecution, revoked Martin's house arrest and ordered his preventive detention, arguing that he posed a danger to society. Additionally, the prosecution succeeded in having the accusations made by other women against Martin recognized. In February 2021, Martin's phone was found. Analysis revealed photos showing him displaying women's underwear. According to authorities, Martin took photos of women's underwear as trophies after going out with them. In March of the same year, the over 15,000 deleted files from Martin's computer were recovered. Among these files, the police found photos of underwear, images of semi-naked women, and videos and audio related to drug use and production. The police report included nearly 400 pages, including statements from victims and witnesses. In June 2022, the Temuco Criminal Court began hearings that were expected to last more than a month. During this period, the prosecution presented a series of evidence, expert testimonies, and witness statements. Security camera footage and the video recorded by the security guard, showing Antonia and Martin walking towards the chalet rented by Martin, were presented during the trial. In all these recordings, it was evident that Antonia was clearly unable to move on her own, indicating that she was out of it, which Martin took advantage of. During the trial, the hypothesis was raised that Martin might have drugged Antonia by putting something in her drink. If proven, this would complicate Martin's situation even further, as it would indicate that he had premeditated the crime. However, despite this hypothesis making sense, authorities were unable to prove it, and it remained just a theory with no practical relevance in the trial. In August 2022, Martin Pradenas was sentenced to 20 years in prison for all his crimes. On December 29th, the Supreme Court of Chile accepted the defense's appeal against the trial's outcome. It was then decided that a new trial should be conducted. In March 2023, Martin's defense team withdrew from the case, which was taken over by the Public Defender's Office. In April of the same year, the new trial of Martin Pradenas began. During this trial, Martin waived his right to remain silent and chose to present his version of events. According to him, the crimes were committed under severe alcohol intoxication, and therefore he could not be held responsible as a normal person. This argument was clearly not accepted by the court, and in July 2023, Martin Pradenas was found guilty of all charges. He was sentenced to 17 years in prison. Considering the time already served, he will have to serve an additional 14 years. The case of Antonia Barra was one of the most talked about in Chile. As a result, a law known as the Antonia Law was enacted, which ensures that anyone who induces another person to take their own life will be punished with imprisonment. Unfortunately, in 2024, the Barra family suffered another tragedy. Sebastian Barra, one of Antonia's older brothers, passed away after an accident while heading to work. On social media, Carla Barra, one of Antonia and Sebastian's sisters, wrote that Sebastian had the most beautiful and pure heart she had ever known, and that he was now in the company of Antonia. The case of Antonia Barra is a sad reminder of the importance of listening to and supporting those who are going through tough times. Justice was served with Martin Pradenas' conviction, but Antonia's tragedy and the recent loss of the Barra family show that the pain doesn't end with a sentence. If you or someone you know is going through similar situations, don't hesitate to seek help. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.